Hi, guys. Welcome to Digital Empaths, and I'm your host, Sushant Ajmani. Today, I'm very delighted to announce that we are starting a weekend knowledge series on our channel for all our subscribers who are very keen to learn the different aspects of the digital ecosystem. As a part of this knowledge series, we'll be discussing on a different topic every weekend. And this week, we have chosen a very interesting topic which is closer to my heart and a very pivotal to our corporate ecosystem. And it's called the art of data storytelling. Now, whenever we think about a good story, there are four key attributes that comes to our mind. The first aspect is the story should be relevant to my audience. Number two, the story should respect the context in which my audience is. Number three, the story should be actionable. And the number four, it should be human friendly. It's easy to consume, less of statistical jargons and more human friendly aspect, the more empathy. Now, in order for us to achieve these four subjective aspects, which is relevance, contextual, actionability, and human friendliness, there are certain key areas we need to focus on while constructing our story. Now, as a part of this particular episode, whenever we use the term story, we are referring to the dashboards and scorecards that, as an analyst or as a citizen data scientist, we set up using platforms like Tableau, Power BI, or Click. Now, before you start any story building using these BI platforms, you need to spend some time with your target audience. Your target audience could be the different individuals who are part of a single department. Your target audience could be a quite diversified audience with spread across different business functions. Your target audience could be the C-level executives, or your target audience could be the power users who are responsible for generating deep dive insights for the senior executives. So understanding the persona of that audience is very, very critical. So the first aspect of a good storytelling is understanding the persona of your audience. The term persona is quite an abstract term. And if we break it down further, the term persona comprises of four aspects. Number one, you should know the role that individual plays in the organization. You should know his day-to-day responsibilities. You should know the different KPIs he or she is accountable for on a weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis, because your KPIs can fluctuate depending on the time granularity and the type of a business you are. If you are a very promotional business, your KPIs that you look at on a weekly basis might be different than the one that you look at on a monthly and quarterly basis. While certain businesses are very flat, they don't show a significant shifts in their trend on a weekly basis. They see more interesting spikes and declines either at the end of the month or at the quarter. So it's very, very important to understand that the person for whom you are stitching up this story, what role he plays, what responsibility he or she carries, what department he or she is a part of, and the fourth part is the different KPIs he or she is accountable for. The second aspect that you need to look at is the context. Again, the context is again a very subjective term, very abstract. So you need to go a little bit deeper into that. Now, whenever we use the term context, we need to look at it from two different angles. The one angle is the time dimension, which means, so suppose you're building a story for a director of supply chain operations or maybe a VP of e-commerce. You need to look at it at what time period he or she is in right now. Is he looking at the end of the week, end of the quarter where all the financial adjustments happen? Is he approaching the end of the fiscal year? Is he looking at the data, keeping in mind that there is a back to school season coming up? Is he looking at the data, keeping in mind that we are approaching a holiday season in America? Let's say there is a Thanksgiving or a Christmas season coming over there. Or We are looking at a story, keeping in mind that today is we are approaching a Memorial Day weekend coming up, or maybe a Labor Day weekend coming up, or maybe there is a Diwali season happening in India. So, depending on the different times of your fiscal year, you need to decide that what kind of a messaging might stick with my audience, that what kind of a story that will be contextual to my audience. The other aspect of being contextual is called actionability. Actionability means that you are choosing the right set of metrics to create a story. See, remember, whenever you're building a story, you need to look at not just your key anchor metrics, you need to also look at the adjacent metrics around that. For example, if a boss comes and asks an analyst that how did we perform last week? And if an analyst simply answers a question, sir, last week we had a pretty wonderful week. We had a revenue of around $5 million. No, that's just a fact. Now, he adds a more context to that by bringing the relative aspect, which means last week we did a business of around $5 million, which is 10% higher than the previous week and 6% higher than the same week last fiscal year. Now, what you're doing is you're bringing the relative aspect, which makes the story a little bit more contextual to my audience. Now, you bring some adjacent metrics to this particular story in order for it to become more enriched for our audience. For example, so last week we did a business of around $5 million, which is 10% higher than the previous week and 6% higher than the same week last fiscal year. However, our gross margin percentage was 28%, which showed a decline of around 9% as compared to the same week last fiscal year. And just see, if you just look at the one metric, it does not tell you the bigger picture. Now, the moment you bring the gross margin aspect, which is your combination of your cost and revenue, now you are bringing a more enriched aspect to your story. Now, let's imagine you did pretty well on the gross margin aspect also. Okay, your gross margin also improved last week. But you also need to look at some other aspects which are top of the funnel, which are influencing your metrics in the middle and the bottom of the funnel, especially your marketing campaigns. You got a decent revenue, you got a decent conversions, but it come at a very high cost per acquisition. Usually your cost per acquisition fluctuates between, let's say, $65 to $70, but in the last few weeks, your cost per acquisition has gone above $85. Okay, so like this, you need to look at the different adjacent metrics around your critical business metrics in order for your story to be more contextual to the audience. So again, I'm summarizing this. So whenever you use the term context, you need to look at from two angles. First, the time as a dimension, that you are respecting that which time aspect or which part of the fiscal year your audience is right now. And the second aspect is the metrics, the different metrics that you're using, the different types of relative comparisons you are doing, and how wonderfully you are stitching your adjacent metrics with your core business critical KPIs. The third aspect of a good storytelling is respecting the consumption medium of your audience. See, we are living in a very hyper-connected world where we all are consuming the insights through multiple devices. The people who are in the top management or the C-level executives, they're always on the move, always connected to their smartphones and tablets. Their attention time span is pretty small. And they are not going to be in a mood to consume a pretty heavy and pretty verbose story that you are pushing in the form of a PPT or a PDF or maybe an Excel scorecard, because the device is very small. Now, even if you are stitching a story for a mid-management folks who are either connected on the smartphones and laptops, you need to see what are the different mediums that they use to consume that story. Some people are very addictive to PowerPoint. Some people are very addictive to the Excel scorecard. Some people are very interested in looking at the email notifications come to their mailbox every Monday morning. I remember I was speaking to a head of supply chain operations with a large CPG brand, and he mentioned to me that for me, the ideal world is that 9 a.m. Monday morning when I come to my office, I don't want to see tons of emails in my mailbox telling me how the last 1 week was. But I want a single email in my mailbox which talks about what happened in the last 24 to 48 hours. Just 3 to 4 bullet points that what were the key anomalies in my data, what were the causal factors behind it, do some predictive indicators like what my coming week looks like and how can I achieve my forecasted numbers with the less variance. And apart from that, any recommendations for me? I don't want that to consume in the form of a sexy looking dashboard. I would be happy if you can just put that in a very succinct and crisp manner in an email body. And that's my ideal world. I wish I could achieve that as soon as possible. So it's very important that whenever you are stitching your story, keep the personification, the context, and the consumption medium aspect into mind because these three are the most fundamental aspects of building a story. Now, if we go a little bit deeper into the personification aspect, that why the understanding the persona is very important. Okay, we discussed that because it allows us to bring empathy in our story. It allows us to bring stickiness with our audience. It allows us to make our story a little bit more actionable for our audience. But beyond that, how are we trying to enforce that basically? See, nowadays most of the businesses are on cloud. We all are working in an ecosystem where the data is coming from disparate sources, whether it is your first party data, your second party data, or a third party data coming from your suppliers, your distributors, your other reselling partners. And that data is somewhere getting aggregating on some kind of a data lake. Now you need to make sure that the person who is consuming that story should be authenticated first, that he is the authorized person to look at that particular story. Okay. Apart from that authentication, you also need to make sure that person is authorized to see the data that he or she is entitled to look at it. And that's where your row level and column level data securities come into picture, which is becoming a very critical aspect whenever you are building a story. Now, whenever you are setting up a dashboard in Tableau, Power BI, and Click, you also need to think about it when you're setting up the backend data model, which fuels that dashboard or a scorecard. That data model is not containing information which your target audience is not authorized to do that. So that means you need to do a lot of row level and data security or the column level data security at the source system have to be implemented. You also need to do a lot of data transformation and filtration at your ETL layer before your final pre-computed data model is enriched and ready enough to construct a story in the form of a dashboard or a scorecard. So at the end of this particular first part of this particular series, I want to just summarize that whenever you are building any good dashboard or a scorecard, the attributes of a good dashboard are understanding the personas of your audience, understanding the context in which he or she is, and also understanding the different consumption mediums that your audience would be using to consume that particular data. In the second part of this particular knowledge series, we'll be discussing on other attributes like bringing the factual anomalies, causal and predictive indicators into your data. We'll also be talking about how to use the different filters to slice and dice your dashboard, how to decide what kind of filters I should be adding into my dashboard or a scorecard. We'll also be talking in the next part that what is an important of a time as a dimension, because that is the fundamental aspect. Okay, so thanks for listening this particular episode, and if you have any questions, any comments, please post it below this video and we'll be more than happy to take it in our next episode. Thanks for listening and stay safe, stay connected.